Okay, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on Asian workforce rights violation in Gulf countries. I am Diana, Head of Advocacy at Democracy Center for Transparency. We are honored to have you all with us today. We warmly welcome MEP Heidi HAUATALA, Vice President of the European Parliament and member of the Delegation for Relations with Countries of Southeast Asian Nations. Thank you for joining us. We further have the privilege to receive MEP Marianne VIND, Vice Chair of the Delegation for Relations with Countries of Southeast Asia and Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Thank you for being with us. We are also pleased to have Professor Irudaya RAJAN from Center for Development Studies in India. Thank you very much for joining us. And finally, we welcome Mr. Khalid IBRAHIM, Executive Director of Gulf Center for Human Rights.
Thank you.
Migrant workers in the Gulf countries are vulnerable to some human rights violations in terms of inadequate medical and physical assistance, absence of solid laws, worse economic conditions, restricted right to mobility and return to countries of origin. This means massive unemployment and paid wages through failing business and wage theft, arbitrary detentions and growing needs for food handouts. Besides, many are stranded due to travel bans and unaffordable tickets, despite the reality that some countries are witnessing noticeable reforms. Some other countries remain with unfulfilled pledges to improve human rights record in this area. We are here today to discuss this issue with our guests. MEP Heidi HAUATALA, we would like to start our webinar giving you the lead to elaborate on the role of the EU enforcing the labor law in favor of migrant workers in Gulf countries.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is a really important human and social rights issue. The abuse of migrant workers in the Gulf countries is a well-documented and a long-standing issue. The biggest challenge, as I see, is controlling the exorbitant recruitment fees and other costs which are imposed on migrant workers from Asian and African countries in the Gulf region, and the resulting debt bondage. So this results in forced labor when combined with the inability to change abusive employers or jobs. I will later explain how the EU is trying to deal with the issue of forced labor, but let me first make some observations about the system in place. The kafala system puts migrant workers' lives and rights at risk in other ways too. There's a chronic lack of overtime compensation and inadequate housing to passport confiscation and delayed wages. Freedom of movement and access to justice are available only in theory. Employers exercise often near total control over the migrant workers and their lives. And we did see what happened when the COVID-19 crisis started to cut jobs, and how, for instance, in Saudi Arabia, many migrant workers from African countries got really in very bad situation, even to detention centers. Now, I think we should look at the major global events, such as the UAE Expo 2020 and the Qatar World Cup 2022, as well as the modernization and Saudi Vision 2030. These are all tarnished by the exploitation of debt bondage laborers, the massive fees they have to pay to agents, employers, and corrupt officials, both at the country of origin and in destination countries. Work accidents and deaths, especially those that are heat-related in construction or heat-related deaths, need to be fully investigated to determine cause, to ensure future prevention and proper compensation. So kafala rests on pervasive corruption. It is impossible to tackle this institutionalized abuse without tackling corruption in all its forms. A few observations about Qatar. It is to be welcomed that Qatar has introduced significant labor reform measures on September the 8th, 2020. And here we could discuss how real these are. Qatar is only the first country in the Arab Gulf region to allow all migrant workers to change jobs on their own accord. It's the second country in the region to set a minimum wage for migrant workers after Kuwait. The reforms will allow migrant workers to change jobs without employer permission and set a higher minimum wage for all workers, regardless of nationality. The changes also apply to migrant workers who have before been excluded from the protection of the labor law, such as domestic workers. So the question now is, how well and how seriously will the government enforce and monitor these new commitments? They could lead to substantial changes, and they could change the lives of very many people. Unfortunately, other legal provisions that facilitate abuse and exploitations of migrant workers remain. And we have to look at those. So some observations about Saudi Arabia. Indeed, Saudi Arabia, host to some of the most repressive forms of kafala, soon followed, introducing its labor reforms in March 2021. So this is a very new trend. These reforms aim to ease the kafala restrictions, and in particular, to allow some migrant workers to change jobs without employer consent under certain circumstances. So it must be said that the reforms do not go far enough. They exclude migrant workers not covered by the labor law, including domestic workers and farmers who are among the least protected and most vulnerable to abuse. They allow migrant workers to request an exit permit without the employer's permission for the first time, but do not abolish the exit permit, which violates human rights. As a result, millions of people are excluded from these reforms. The only reasonable conclusion is that these reforms do not achieve the abolition of the kafala system in Saudi Arabia. Now, it serves no purpose to discuss these issues separate from each other, and I'm talking about trade and forced labor. Regulations and laws are needed to bring to end the kafala system. This means a normal modern recruitment system coupled with due diligence requirements upheld by all concerned, the government procurers, buyers, suppliers, employers, and agents. And no one should have to pay to do difficult, dirty, and demanding work, and regulations thus need to ensure ethical and free recruitment. Now, I'm happy to tell you that the European Parliament has been at the forefront demanding stronger laws and taking up cases where abuse is suspected. In October 2020, European Parliament adopted a resolution on the situation of Ethiopian migrants and in detention centers in Saudi Arabia, condemning the unlawful detention and abuse inflicted on the foreign workers. But there is more and more significant changes in the EU trade policy and in how we look at the ethical aspects of supply chains. I am very pleased to see that the European Commission is coming out with a proposal for a mandatory due diligence legislation, which is aiming at ensuring that the entire value chain leading to or from the EU is clean from all forms of abuse, and that all victims will have a right to remedy. This type of due diligence legislation, as it is being foreseen, will be the leading of its kind in the world. And hopefully it will also have following in other regions, such as, say, Southeast Asia, United States, and so on. It aims to support the implementation of the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which are now exactly 10 years old. So 10 years and now some serious implementation efforts, at least in the EU. So finally, going forward, it will be crucial to adopt a business and human rights responsible business conduct lens to all investments and trading in the Gulf from the EU side. Thank you very much.
MEP HAUATALA, thank you very much for your contribution. Emphasizing the role of the EU policy towards a better intervention of solid laws to the rights of the migrant workers and identifying legal obligations by the Gulf countries, MEP Marianne VIND is invited to give a deeper insight.
Thank you very much.
Should I put the slides now? Should I start?
Yes, please. Yes. Something is happening?
Can you?
Yeah.
Joo, mä
Yes.
15:03, niin
So you had to go up to number 1.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Now.
Yes, and you may turn the first one. Yes, there, exactly. Yeah. Thank you to the Democracy Center for Transparency for letting me speak today on this very important topic. I'm happy that despite COVID times, we can still meet for events, even if we are behind our screens. Today's topics has, in light of the coronavirus, become more important than ever before. Yeah. We have seen that the workforce have been affected by the pandemic and workers have suffered significant consequences, especially those receiving the lowest wages. The issues of violations of the rights of Asian workers in the Middle East is tremendous and highly complex challenge. As it affects millions of migrant workers, it is necessary to find a comprehensive solution in cooperation with the Middle Eastern nations. During the following presentation, I will elaborate on the problem at hand that could be done by the EU. What tools the EU has at its disposal to protect human rights and shed a light on our limitations in relation to Middle East and protection of workers' rights. So please, next one. Yeah. There is a severe lack of regulation and protection of migrant workers in all Gulf states and other parts of the Arab world. This results in low wages, exploitation of labor, abuse by the employee. Likewise, there is the concerning amount of racial and gender-based discrimination. The kafala system gives private citizens and companies almost total control over migrant workers' employment and migration status, which only results in exploitation of cheap labor. Even though there is still a long way to go, we have seen some positive developments in some parts of the Middle East. Please, the next one. The 30th of August 2020, the Qatari government announced the adoption of a law that no longer allows the employer to decide whatever a migrant worker can change jobs and no longer can decide whether the workers leave the country. And Qatar also adopted a non-discriminatory minimum wage for migrant workers. This is historic decisions. It's a significant achievement for the workers' rights, which shows Qatar is one the part, but most definitely not there, to establish more dynamic and non-discriminatory labor market. In 10 years ago, in 2030, we adopted a solution on situation on migrant workers and has since then fought to address the situation on a regular basis through political dialogue with Qatar. This comes to prove that dialogue has been fruitful, even though we would like to witness even more progress. I'm hopeful that we will proceed with a quick and just implementation of reform to ensure the well-being of foreign labor. Qatar's decision to create a more just labor market will hopefully also serve as an inspiration for other Gulf Cooperation Council countries. I hope. Please, the next slide. Sharon Burrow, General Secretary of the ILO, has also stated that Qatar has dismantled the systematic power imbalance between workers and employers. It is a break from the past and offers a future for migrant workers in Qatar underpinned by laws that respect workers. Further, I agree that countries of origin are better at supporting their national by seeking bilateral labor agreements with providers of minimum wage and working conditions. This is also the opinion of RAJAN, head of the Qatar office of the ILO. Please, next one. The EU has a great responsibility to act wherever we can and does not condemn the poor treatment of migrant workers anywhere in the world. We do have the opportunity to improve conditions through trade and knowledge sharing in some cases. But foreign policy is still in large part competences of the individual member states, which means that the EU toolbox at our disposal is somewhat limited. The EU has created some tools to pressure third countries to foster respect for human rights. For instance, all treaties and agreements signed by the EU need to be compliant with human rights as defined by the EU Charter. This means that all council bodies dealing with foreign affairs need to incorporate human rights into their work. Please, the next one. However, these tools do not apply to the UAE and KSA and the other Gulf countries. The 1989 cooperation agreement with the Gulf Council does unfortunately not contain any human rights provisions as the human rights clause first appeared in the 90s. A trade agreement has been under negotiation for several years now, but no result in sight. This is a major obstacle, as it means that there will not be regular human rights dialogues with these countries in the near future. The EU leverage in finance and in economic terms is also somewhat limited. Please, the next one.
And the last one.
Yes, so what can we do? Well, the EU use diplomatic channels to continue dialogue with the Saudi authorities and Gulf countries on human rights concerns and hold regular meetings with human rights defenders. Under the European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, support is also provided to individual human rights defenders under confidentiality provisions. This is really important because it raises awareness and promotes the respect of fundamental human rights in the Gulf region. The EU has also since 2016 launched an annual informal human rights dialogue with Bahrain, as well as United Arab Emirates and Qatar since 2018. Since 2013, the EU delegation has obtained permission for diplomats to attend public trials in Saudi Arabia, which is also important as creates some transparency in the courts of Saudi Arabia. There is also an ongoing dialogue with the Human Rights Department in the Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The EU delegation in Riyadh is also in constant contact with the Human Rights Commission to discuss issues such as minors on death row and causes of human rights defenders. When it comes to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, United Arabia, and other Gulf countries, it's evident that the EU's ability to act is very limited. I have to stress that it is extremely frustrating that we as we continue to see migrant workers being abused and taken away of. The progress we've seen is most definitely not satisfactory, but we must continue to use diplomacy to its fullest extent and create progress and awareness. Good diplomatic relations and the willingness of the nations themselves to promote proper working conditions is the way forward, and we are seeing some develops. Lastly, I believe that issues like these cannot be addressed quickly in one piece of legislation as they highly complex. So thank you to all of you for your time. And again, thank you to the DCT for organizing this very important event. It has been a pleasure to speak at this webinar. Hopefully we can see each other again outside the screen. Have a great day.
Thank you, MEP Vind. Thank you very much for your valuable contribution. Now, wage theft is one of the most significant violations against migrant workers, causing them unemployed and bringing about the lives of them and their families through peril. Shedding light on that, we would like to listen to Professor Irudaya RAJAN.
Thank you, Diana, for the invitation, and I'm very pleased to be part of this particular team. I think they're all on the, with the different network and different organizations. When I saw the title of your thing, workforce rights violation in the Gulf countries, I think I started my first field work in UAE in 2001. So almost 20 years back. Then I did field work along with my staff in UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, and Kuwait. All those countries, we have done some field work to understand the migrants issue. And I use what I call them return migrants, because anybody who is going to work in the Gulf, because they are not going to get the green card or blue card like Europe, they have to come back. It is not just true to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal. You look at South Asia and the Gulf, it's the biggest migration corridor. So they have to return back. So when they return back, I do survey among return migrants in India to understand what were the problem they faced on labor right violation while they were there as migrants. I think when we did the study, there are 4 to 5 human rights violations were happening prior to the COVID-19. Of course, COVID-19, we have to look at it pre-COVID and COVID and post-COVID. Now we have to study the violations in a 3 different way. Pre-COVID, what was that? And COVID, we know that how they were treated. Now post-COVID, what is going to happen? And of course, we are not come to the post-COVID because still COVID is coming in a big way. India has a second wave now. We are almost close to 300,000 people affected every day. And so it's going to be a big issue. Now, when you look at it pre-COVID, most of the migrants, they told us their passports were taken away by the employers. That means even the basic document through which they move, it was already taken away by the employer. So there are no passports. And the contract, what they sign in the countries of origin like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, when they go back to Gulf countries, many of the employers, they will replace the contract. This contract, what they sign, people leaving has been, said no, they are signing a new contract. And the third one was that the salary, what they were promised when they left India, the salary which was given to them is sometimes 30% cut. That means what was promised, salary was not paid. Mm-hmm. The fourth one is very important, is the living condition of the migrants. They were all in the, you might have seen the worker camps in some of the Gulf countries. Some of them are very, very bad. Some of them are very good. Yes, I visited some countries with the help of the Indian embassy some time back. Some of them are very good. I don't mind even staying there. But some of them are very bad. You don't want to stay there. I think that is something we should look at it. But COVID period, I think there is something heavily added to migrants. I think the COVID is basically a health crisis, but cut by stopping border. We are asking people not to come out. So we have converted the health crisis into the migration crisis. Otherwise, it is nothing to do with migration. When we are closing the border, migrants are getting affected, not just in the foreign countries, even within our own countries. We cannot move between one city to another city. Yeah. Now, when in Kerala, there are 500,000 people came after the COVID-19, and we are doing a survey right now. And the findings are there. Several of the return migrants who came through the Vande Bharat flights to India, many of them said they have not received salary for 4 to 5 months. So we have a big campaign now. We call them wage theft. That means it's like a daylight robbery by some employers. They have not, because these migrants want to come back home because they were COVID, everywhere COVID. They want to come and stay with their wives and children. They want to die, not in Dubai or Qatar or Bahrain. They want to come back. They said, you want to go, you go. And then many people are not paid salary. When the World Bank predicted there is a 10% decline of remittances, I am telling them, even the World Bank, the decline of remittances from the Gulf to other countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, it is not the decline. Basically, the salaries, the wage were stolen by the employer. We call them wage theft. I think that is something I would like to emphasize to the audience. This is something we should look at it. If we can help them, at least some migrant to get their salary back. But I'm talking to some of the lawyers in India. We can create what is called a minimum, how many people, we can do a signature campaign, and we can go through our Indian embassy and we can get to the employer and we can get the money back of the hard work migrants. I think we are going to give justice to them. I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Professor Irudaya, Rajan, thank you very much for your contribution. Giving a general overview of the situation of migrant workers in Gulf countries in terms of cross-regional issues, roles of governments, NGOs, human rights organizations, and future perspectives. Mr. Khalid Ibrahim is invited to handle it.
Good afternoon, all of you. Thank you a lot, Diana, for giving me this opportunity to talk about the plight of the migrant workers in the Gulf countries. And thanks also to the other speakers. Thanks also to Heidi for her efforts at the EU to support the human rights defenders in the UAE, including GCHR's board member, Ahmed Mansour. Due to the limited time available to me, first of all, I will touch upon some regional trends that GCHR has documented across the region. Then I will talk briefly about the situation of migrant workers in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, as well as Lebanon. The trends that we have witnessed, first, they are mostly overworked and underpaid. For example, this is a testimony that we have in Qatar. To secure a plumbing job, a migrant worker had to take a loan at a 30% interest rate in order to pay a Kenyan recruitment agent a fee of $1,173 in the hope that he will be paid $329 a month. However, on arrival for his job, his salary was not paid to him for several months as a security deposit. So he was forced to take on more loans. Eventually, after 3 months, he was paid for the first time, and the salary was shocking. It was only $228. Now, the minimum wage in Qatar is $275, very little compared to the salaries that are given to citizens that will be thousands of US dollars. The second trend is racism and discrimination. Migrant workers were beaten on many occasions and accused of being the reason for the spread of COVID-19 pandemic. And then the third trend, the kafala, and the respected speakers, they mention it, and it is the Arabic word for sponsorship. This system is legal and common across the Middle East, providing middle class and rich families with domestic workers. Now the workers, as said, have no right whatsoever, and their passports are held by agents who assign them to families. Their visas are valid only if they stick to their employments. The opportunity for abuses of the system and of the people within it are huge. Now, number four, the fourth trend is no right to form unions or organize strikes to demand their rights. This is really very difficult to accept, that workers have no right to establish unions to defend their basic rights. Now, in general, migrant workers across the Middle East are not treated the same as citizens in terms of payment, compensation, promotion, training opportunities, in addition to medical care, and often have their basic rights violated. Migrant workers in the region have over the year been subjected to massive violation through the notorious kafala, and we talked about kafala. Now, I have to say that the kafala system contracts the principles of human rights on modern work system that are guaranteed under the International Convention on the Rights of Migrants and Members of their Families, signed in 1990. This convention has not been signed by the Gulf states and Lebanon, unfortunately. Now, I go to Saudi Arabia. On the 14th of March, 2021, Ahmed Abdulaziz, who is the Saudi Minister of Human Resources and Social Development, issued a decision to abolish the kafala system that has been in place since 1951. The advantages offered by the new initiative to migrant workers include the job mobility that allow a migrant worker to move, and also there are another advantage. There is no need for the employer's approval after 90 days in order to travel. But the problem with it, the new no kafala system will not allow workers to come to the country until after their work contract is available. Furthermore, the requirement to wait 3 months. They have to wait 3 months to switch to a new job. It's a long period that restricts the freedom of movement and work for workers. Also, this initiative will not include 5 professions, namely private drivers, guards, domestic workers, and others. Despite the absence of accurate official statistics about their actual number, they are about 3.66 million migrants, representing about 59% of workers in Saudi Arabia. So this is a big problem, like you exclude people from a new legislation. And still, as I said, the new legislation is under questions. If we move to Kuwait, we see that a blogger posted a video, this is about racism, on a snapshot, attacking Egyptian worker this time in Kuwait with unprecedented violence. Although the video encountered widespread opposition from Kuwaiti citizens, it was part of a growing phenomenon of hate speech. Hate speech across the Gulf countries needs to be addressed. Last year, the double crisis of low oil prices and the COVID-19 pandemic prompted not just Kuwait, most of the Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, to reassess their policies regarding the number of migrant workers. And many companies laid off thousands and deported those who work without legal permission. Of course, many of them, they paid a heavy price and they lost a lot of opportunities. Now, if we move to UAE, United Arab Emirates, since the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, press reports confirmed the prevalence of the disease among migrant workers. And now we are talking about medical care. You have to provide all people without any discrimination with medical care, but that is not the case when it's about migrant workers. And if we move to Lebanon, we have some calls not to give them the vaccine. Well, they are part of the society and they have to be treated equally when it's about medical care or other rights. In Qatar, the GCHR, the Gulf Center for Human Rights, had received for many years reports that migrant workers do not enjoy any of their basic rights, including the formation of unions, in addition to being exploited in heavy work for long hours in the hot sun while getting paid low salaries, including for the World Cup. They are denied the right to terminate their contract and return to their home countries. We have a lot of reports, but the time is not available to me to read some of the reports or the testimonies. Now, back to Lebanon, also with the collapse of the Lebanese pound against the US dollars and the COVID-19 pandemic, migrant workers in Lebanon, especially domestic workers, face extremely harsh conditions. The Lebanese labor law have not protect domestic workers who are usually women, and as they are subject to sponsorship system, the kafala, the same system that links the legal status of the workers in the country with a contractual relationship with the employer. At the end of this relationship, the workers lose their legal status and face the risk of detention and deportation. Many of them, we have seen them in the streets after they lost their work in the front of their embassies, trying to get back home. So I end with some recommendations. They are very important. We just need to work together to fully abolish the kafala system, the sponsorship system. This is very important to protect the civil and human rights of migrant workers. And also we have to ratify the International Convention on the Rights of Migrants and members of their families and develop a strategy to implement its provision vision to ensure effective and comprehensive protection of the rights of migrants, workers, and members of their families. I have to say it is very sad that after long years of working in these countries, they are not entitled to get their citizenship. I think this is so bad that they are not given access to the citizenship of these countries after the really valuable service that they have given to these countries. Also, it is very important to legislate. I said that is related to citizenship. It is very important to legislate a modern immigration system that allow them to apply for citizenship. And then it is important also to adopt an integrated program to remedy the situation of the undocumented migrant workers. They have to be given permit to work. And then we have to provide full health care to migrant workers in a manner that ensure their protection against all kinds of diseases, and including the COVID-19 pandemic. And then eliminate all form of discrimination, as well as policies that distinguish between workers in different sectors, whether they are citizen or migrant workers. Of course, I have to say that they have to be given the right to form unions and also to have a strike demanding their rights. I stop here and I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Mr. Khalid, thank you very much for your contribution. Here we stop also. Thank you all for being with us this afternoon. It has been a pleasure to see you all. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, all of you. And that is really nice to meet you, and we will be in touch. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye for now.